I really thought they're going to be like, Clay, we like what you're doing. You're an amateur. This is what you need to do.
Yeah, here's your 10-step process.
We're gonna fix you.
100%. Yeah, these people are going to tell me what I need to do and give me what I need. I literally got into MeatEater and they were like, what are you going to do, Clay? I mean, that was literally what it was like. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought y'all were going to tell me what to do.
How did bear grease come to fruition? And was that like an instant idea? Like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know the scope. I know what the end goal is. Or did that kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, it definitely evolved rather quickly, but it was not something that I wanted to do. Years ago, when I started a podcast, it was just a business decision inside of Bear Hunting Magazine to just have an outlet. It wasn't something I was passionate about. We just started a podcast.
Yeah.
And for us, it did pretty good. I didn't really think much about it other than I just enjoyed talking to people and trying to hash out. A lot of it was like tactical bear stuff. And so I enjoyed talking about those things. And so it's kind of a surprise to me when they said they wanted me to do a podcast. I was like, really? It really was. It was kind of a surprise. And they hired me without really any talk of what that was going to be. It was just like, come work for us and we'll get it figured out.
Yeah.
And so back in my Bear Hunting Magazine podcast days, I remember listening to a Malcolm Gladwell podcast.
Yeah.
And
you listen to his revisionist history
all the time.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
And it used to be. It's kind of
Actually,
weird
agree.
now.
Now you'll have it's like a car ad, but it's the whole thing.
Yeah, I think he's not as good. When it first came out, it was really good.
It was
and
great.
Insightful, and a lot of really great production. And I remember thinking somebody ought to do a podcast like that for hunting, like a documentary style podcast that's really well produced and thought out and written and insightful. And it was like somebody other than me should do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not joking. Like I thought, man, somebody ought to do that. That would do so good. But it wasn't me. So we had a meeting eventually shortly after I worked there with the whole MeatEater team about, Clay's podcast. What's it going to be? I had almost named the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast the Bear Grease Podcast.
Oh, okay.
But just I like the name.
You kind of been sitting on that name.
I had
in the vault.
It's been sitting there, man, because I'm telling you, we discovered bear grease again in American culture 10 years ago. I mean, it may sound arrogant to say that, but it's kind of the truth. Like, people weren't talking about bear grease. People didn't. It's just like, I'm not saying some people didn't do it because they did, but it was not being talked about in media.
Yeah.
Nowhere. Man, I was reading these old historical stories about bear grease and market hunting and the commodities of bear grease, and this guy out in White Cloud, New Mexico, that used bear grease to forecast the weather, and all the folklore around bear grease, and Gerstocker, this guy here in Arkansas that hunted bears in the 1830s. His dog's name was Bear Grease, and
Great dog name.
Yeah, and it's just like, bear grease is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I started rendering bear grease and making it and using it and cooking with it and trying stuff with it. And I just always thought it was so cool. And so I had this name. I just thought it was a cool name, Bear Grease.
It is a cool name.
And so when the idea came up for a podcast, I was like, well, we call it Bear Grease.
Here we go.
But Steve was the one who said, hey, I think you should do like an interview style. He said like an NPR style, like Terry Gross interview. He just had like this little, and I got to give credit to him. he had just a very general, he was just like, I want to like hear what you think about stuff. I want you to interview people and then tell us what you think. That was pretty much all he had.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'll think about that. I mean, I don't really know how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But
so the onus was kind of on you. He kind of had an
when
inkling of an idea, but it was like, you got to figure this out.
Well, when I came there, I thought I was coming to the experts in the outdoor industry, who I was.
Yeah.
But that were going to tell me what I needed to do.
Okay. Yeah.
I really thought they're going to be like, Clay, we like what you're doing. You're an amateur. This is what you need to do.
Yeah, here's your 10-step process.
We're gonna fix you.
It never 100%. Like I was just like, yeah, these people are going to tell me what I need to do and give me what I need. And I literally got into MeatEater and they were like, what are you going to do, Clay? I mean, that was literally what it was like. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought y'all were going to tell me what to do. And that ended up being the greatest thing they could have ever done. That they're really good at giving people freedom to follow their passion. And what Steve told me is he said the number one thing, Clay, that you need to do is you need to talk about stuff you're passionate about. He said, don't worry about what you think people want to hear. Talk about what you are excited about. And, pretty quickly I formulated the general idea of what bear grease was.
Yeah.
I said, man, I guess I could interview people and have voiceovers. And we did, they said, well, make some mock episodes.
Right.
So the first guy that I went to was my old buddy, James Lawrence, down in the Washitaws. And I wanted to tell his story of the Shedhorn buck of 1962. He was 10 years old. He killed this big buck. He was a little kid. His dad was off hunting and he stayed home and kind of learned how to hunt deer. It was a wild story. And he found sheds of this buck for 3 years when he was a little kid in the 1950s in Arkansas. He found 3 years of matching sheds. 1 year the sheds were 170. I got him up there. He gave them to me. I went to James and I had him tell me this story.
Yeah.
And while we were there, I was like, James, tell me about your history of living here. And we went to the graveyard where his grandparents were buried. And I remember pulling out my recorder and kind of feeling weird and just being like, hey, tell me about them.
Talk to me.
We're standing over the grave of his grandparents. And he's just like telling me about how, they came into this valley, when they came and what this guy did. And it was like really special. And then I went home, started putting it together and sent it back to the MeatEater folks and they put it together. And it would be interesting to hear that podcast because we all listened to it and went, huh, that was okay.
I thought you were going to tell me that this was like, boom,
well,
we got it.
It took a lot of work. I had all the raw materials. I had this incredible story. I had kind of James in the field. I had, what else was on that first episode? There was a couple other little aspects that were on it that were kind of different, kind of documentary style, like driving down the road in a car and music I listened to it and I was just like, I don't know if that's good or not. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so I had some ideas that seemed radical at the time, but kind of to be more aggressive on the storytelling aspect of it. From my voiceover, like to really
you have some more influence with it.
Like to really say what I thought. Like I went back into the voiceover and I described what James Lawrence looked like. I said, James used to be a smoker, and he's got a beard, the manliest big beard you've ever seen, and his face is wrinkled. He used to be a smoker, and I don't remember all the details, but I kind of like painted this picture of what James looked like, and at the time it was kind of out there to me.
Yeah.
But then when we put it all back together, it was like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah.
And then basically when it all came together for real was the third mock episode that I did was the myth of the Southern mountain lion. And on that one, I went and interviewed a psychologist. I interviewed multiple people that said they saw panthers.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed Myron Means, large carnivore biologist.
Right.
And basically, at the time, it was wild to think that I could interview a psychologist about cognitive bias and naive realism. Just like, why do people think they've seen a mountain lion?
Right.
And it ended, and we put it together, and that one popped. I mean, it was like funny. It was, and I was in shock because I had done all these interviews, and none of them were. I mean, they're just kind of okay.
Yeah, they're just conversations.
But when you put them together and cherry picked out the good parts, and you put in the VO, and you put in the music, and it was like, holy cow, this is gonna work.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of compounded from there. And so we took that one, though it was the third episode that we made, we put it first. And I remember when we put it first, me and my boss thought it was risky because we thought that was the best podcast we were ever going to make. Like I actually thought
Number 3.
I thought I will never have another story that good.
Yeah.
That's what we thought.
You're like, I don't want to come out and set the bar too high.
Oh,
because we'll never match it again.
I knew that it was going to be like, because that's what not everybody does, but that's what happens in life is like somebody comes out swinging hard and you're like, oh, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like
Tapers
isn't.
off. Yeah.
And
Revisionist history.
yeah.
Gladwell.
So, but we were just like, man, if we're going to come out, we better come out swinging.
Yeah.
And so we put that one out first, and it just got a lot of hype and a lot of press, and then we just kept telling stories, and here I am 2.5 years into it, which really isn't that long, but oh man, it's been I feel like I've been afforded the ability to get a PhD in whatever it is I study. I mean, we started doing these historical characters like Daniel Boone and Holt Collier and Davy Crockett and Lewis Wetzel and Folsom Points and Warner Glenn and just all the roadshow taxidermy was one of my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting a
Asa Carter, the Asa Carter story in educational literature. I mean, there is no shortage of incredible stories out there.
Yeah.
And it's been like highly developmental for me to study these things. And then now, man, it's like when good stuff starts happening, it compounds on itself. Like we're now, when I approach a subject, I'm looking for like the best person in the country to talk to.
Yeah.
Well,
I just listened to your Davy Crockett series, and to hear, I mean, you're talking with the foremost experts on the subject, and even down to the minuscule details of how he died and why it matters, and the records and diaries and everything. It's like, in what world and like would a normal person have access to those types of people? Yeah. It's really pretty incredible that, and it's, I mean, it's because I do it for a living and I take it serious, and I'm able, I have the freedom to go, and I mean, and I do 99% of my interviews in person. Like I'm flying to Greenville, Tennessee. Well, flying to Knoxville, then to Greenville next week to go meet a guy, talk to him. And, I mean, I travel a lot. Yeah.
I'll travel across the country to talk to a guy face to face.
That's the right way to do it.
It is. It's important.
It's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
We did some virtual for a bit and got away from it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's just hard to have that one-on-one connection and get what you're wanting out of it.
Yeah.
Like you may get the words, but you're not going to get the same feel.
Yeah.
There's something important about being in person.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm curious. This will be a 2-part question. I'll just give you the first one. How do you come up with the inspiration for a subject, a topic? Like when you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do next? Where does it come from on, I want to go down this rabbit hole and spend 5 episodes doing a series on it, or I'm just going to do one here. Like, how do you come up with the ideas for a new episode?
Man, it's just like creativity in any other area of life. It's like, why did you want to paint that painting or learn that song? I mean, it just all goes back to genuine interest. Like I people will suggest stuff to me all the time, like every day.
Yeah.
And
I believe that.
And I don't. It's okay. And people have a good idea, but I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just not that interested in that.
Yeah.
But then, in some of these topics, some of these things that I have done big podcasts on were suggested to me. I mean, it's not like I just think of it all on my own.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like I think in storytelling, you've got to just have a natural instinct for what works for your style of storytelling and just how passionate you are about the thing. And some of it are roadblocks. Like this week, I read half a book and just put it down, and I was just like, it's not it.
Mm.
I thought it was.
You're going down that road.
Yeah. I actually had guests lined up. Like I didn't schedule with them. Like I didn't have to cancel with them. But we had this whole thing specced out. I had done everything but really the research. We just thought it was going to be so big. Me and Isaac Neal, my buddy that helps me, and I got to reading the book, and I was just like,
I don't know.
It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It just didn't do it for me. I couldn't get excited to put it down. And maybe I'll go back to it, but just instinct, man.
Yeah.
I want to tell the world the stories that I'd be excited to tell my kids.
That makes sense.
I want to tell my kids about Daniel Boone and Holt Collier and taxidermy and gas stations, and
that was a fun one.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much. You know, I'm grateful to the space, like the I didn't think people cared about this stuff, to be honest with you. Like I remember when I first did my Daniel Boone series, it was the first historical series I'd ever done. And I remember almost being apologetic to people, thinking that it was like too much information.
Too much like history class.
Yeah, too much like history.
Yeah.
And I remember I actually said it. You can go back and listen to it, where I said, "Hey guys, this is a little different. You're gonna have to put your thinking caps on for this one and really listen up. We're gonna learn some stuff." And kind of joking about it was gonna be like, and that Boone series is probably the most talked about podcast that we've done.
Yeah.
And it kind of set a template for us for how to take these historical stories and tell a story. And
not make it just feel like a history class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been so
That's
much
great.
fun. It's so much fun. It really is.
I think what is interesting is because I would probably like if you had just pitched that to me on the front end without hearing it, I'd have been like, I mean, yeah, but it's like I think history class. I'm like, I heard of him. I know some stuff. I don't know how I know the stuff, but I know something from somewhere. But I like you do it in a way to where it makes it interesting, to where it's like, I didn't know that I cared about this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't know that this was cool until I heard these stories, and you get into some of the nitty gritty details, and you're like, oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah. It's all over, man. We're such products of our culture. Some of it we don't even know or understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's why stories really matter.
Yeah.
You're shaped by your story you tell yourself and the stories of the world around you, and all of it. It's important.
Yeah.
So knowing your scope and knowing like this is what we do on Bear Grease, I think part of knowing like what you do is also knowing like what you won't do, like what you won't touch and topics you won't go down. I'm curious, like where do you draw the line in the outdoor world of, like for example, for us, we talk hunting and fishing, but like, okay, mountain biking in the Ozarks is growing and it's becoming more and more popular. But like for us, that's kind of where we draw the line, is like we want to cover things that are like wild things and wild places and natural resources. For you, do you kind of have a line drawn in the outdoor world of like, I will and won't cover this, and this is kind of how I think about things?
Yeah, probably, but it's hard for me to define that, because there's a lot of podcasts we do that really don't have a lot to do with hunting.
Yeah.
But they've all got to do with rural America. For instance, we did this series on Asa Carter, and the connection to hunting was that this author wrote a book called The Education of Little Tree, which The Education of Little Tree was a fictional book that was thought to be autobiographical about a Cherokee Indian boy raised in the mountains of southern Appalachia. And in the book, they fox hunted with hounds, they turkey hunted, they did some outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
That was our entry point. We talked about that. We talked about how this author wrote in these incredible ways and described nature and but then the whole podcast wasn't about that. The whole podcast was about this guy, Asa Carter, and how he kind of defrauded the world. And it was about human nature. It was about racism. It was about, kind of got into some of the deep politics of the South with George Wallace and like wild stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the way that there's a bigger philosophy too. And we know we've been talking a long time, so I mean I could talk all night.
Keep going, man.
We got time.
Divulge into whatever you want to divulge into.
Well, really what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about hunting. I'm passionate about squirrel hunting and coon hunting and deer hunting and bear hunting and all this stuff. But really what I'm passionate about is a preservation of a way of life. Like I want my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, should the earth persist, my great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be able to have wild places and live a life like I have, to have access to that. And that is something that's not, I mean, it's easy to say that. Like you might hear someone say that and you just repeat it.
Yeah.
Man, that is what, I mean, I really want that. I feel like the modern culture here in North America is leaving us in the dust in a way. I mean, there's a lot of good things that are happening in the outdoor industry that we're on an upward trend towards becoming relevant inside of society. I think by telling these stories that we are making ourselves relevant because people are listening to, I would hope people could listen to Bear Grease and some episodes more than others, but they might be like, not have a thing to do with hunting. And they might listen to an episode and learn something about human nature, learn something about natural systems, learn something about their history that they don't even acknowledge in their connection to through history to the natural world, learn about American identity. I mean, so much of the original idea of being American had to do with interaction with wild places. I mean, Europe had castles and architecture and art and music. When those guys came over here, we had wilderness. Our first art, we didn't have anything to paint. We didn't have the Sistine, we didn't have the Eiffel Tower to paint or whatever. We painted wilderness and we cherished that. And that was, Boone being an American archetype for identity, rugged individualism, and some of these things that could be taken to an extreme that are not healthy, but at their core, there's some meat on the bone of things that are healthy and fruitful, that are deep inside of American identity. And I think that as hunters become more relevant in society, kind of like what Renell is doing with saying, hey, this food, and we're connected to this, and there's relevance inside of who we are, that we are making a space for ourselves culturally. I mean, that's my message to the world at large is leave a space for the American backwoodsman. You can have these people that you create space for. Like, these are Americans. There is a slot, and a pretty big one, of American backwoodsmen that have every right to be here and have a way of life preserved. We're like a people group. Yeah. I mean, that's the way I see it. I mean, you could debate of whether that would be even okay to say. I think it's like we're like a people group. I mean, it's just deep inside of who we are, in the way this country was formed, and it's just so. My goal is that people might listen to a Bear Grease and they would go, "Who are these people?" Yeah, and they go, "Those are the hunters." I mean, just like they did with Daniel Boone. When Boone walked into the legislature in his buckskins and spoke with wisdom and reason, and they're like, "Who is this guy?" Yeah, like, this is a American backwoodsman.
Yeah. Do you think that our culture, as far away from that as we've gotten, is bound to or capable of reverting back to a basic connection to the outdoors? Or do you think that it will just continue on until we've lost most of that connection?
Well, I mean, I think there's cultural moves in all societies that impact people and are significant. And I think we are in the middle of one right now that's significant. But also there's all these other huge moves that are not helpful towards us. So, I mean, you know, not everybody in America has to have some deep connection to the natural world. That's not what I'm saying. Not everybody has to be a hunter or like deer meat or want to kill a bear. But just we need to be the caretakers of the wild places that we have. That should be our role, is that the hunters are the ones that are the caretakers of wild places and wild animals. It's worked. It's worked for the last 120 years.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot. We're the ones who brought back the big game species onto this continent.
Mm-hmm.
We have the most successful animal husbandry practices and philosophy of any civilization that's ever lived through the North American model of wildlife conservation, which really is really new. I mean, you know, we think about it, it was formed in really, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s, and now we're kind of living in the fruit of it. I mean, 100-year span in human history is like nothing. So we're just at the very beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you guys know all the stuff, but it's really pretty incredible and beneficial to society what we offer.
Yeah.
And you know, where a wild animal has cultural value through hunting, that animal will be protected and its land will be protected. And today, one of the most valuable commodities that our society has that is in short supply is wild places.
Yeah.
And you know, it would be foolish to say that all our public lands and even private lands that are undeveloped are there because of hunting. That wouldn't be true. But it wouldn't be far from the truth. I mean, like the people that are interacting with public lands and the private lands in this country, which, you know, most of the country is private land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That, I mean, the guys that aren't selling their land and building subdivisions, a lot of them have added value to that land through recreational hunting.
Right.
And it's like, that is the model that will save wild places, is make things valuable to people. And we make it valuable by having cultural value, by not, I mean, there's got to come a point when people wake up and they don't want to just instinctively go and develop a tract of land and make a bunch of money. I mean, it's wild to think that but I mean, I don't think that way. I mean, like, we have pillaged this place, and there will come a time when wild places will have so much value because it's all, and I'm talking about private land. I mean, even around here, it's like there's land right around here for sale that people would love to do nothing more than to put in subdivisions. And it's like, I mean, it's hard to argue with the dollar, but there'll come a time when wildness has incredible value, and it does today in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I mean, recreational hunting land is very much in demand, and I think we have to just continue to promote that. And there's problems with it. I mean, there's problems with, you know, people not being able to afford private land. And, you know, you hear all this banter about, you know, hunting's becoming the elite. We're becoming like Europe. I don't know. I'd rather have it than not have it. Yeah. I mean,
well, I think too that, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and even talking about Bear Hunting Magazine and the first start of the dial-up internet, and then all of it. We're so new and early into the North American model for conservation. We're even newer into just the technology boom of, I mean, the last decade and a half or so.
Yeah.
That I think, and I mean, I see this a lot in what I do for a living. I think there's a movement that, I mean, we're really just getting into, of a lot of young people realizing, I don't want to be connected to everybody all the time by the push of my thumb, and I'm like immediately accessible. And I also don't want my attention to be sold for profit by the megacorps of tech and all of that. And like, man, I want to like, can we take 10 steps back and can kind of reassess? I actually think hunting and fishing at some level for that type of person, spiritual awakening may be too much of an idea, but it can be a reversal back into like, no, this is how man was created to be. And it's actually, I don't know, it's kind of a way to like win back their life a little bit and recognize like no, I can, this is important, and now I care about it and I matter. I mean, we talk to people all the time. We're always learning. That's our favorite part about what we get to do. But remember Austin Booth talking about the waterfowl being the ones that had cultural value and hunter value. So they're the ones that have thrived when all these other songbirds are getting lost, that kind of thing. And you take that's one element, that's one bird, a few birds, and you start applying that to everything that we still have that's able to be conserved and celebrated and all of that. And you're going to have a really beautiful country filled with beautiful places and beautiful wildlife and honestly happier and healthier people. But if all America's concrete, I don't want to be here anymore. And
it doesn't sound very fun.
But yeah, that, I don't know, it's my long form thought on, I liked what you were getting at, and it's just fun to think about.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people who listen, who hunt and fish can relate to that. And I think that even too, hearing you talk about, you kind of already answered a question I was going to ask next, which is, what is your end goal? Like, what are you working towards that is the reason why you do the podcast, is the reason why you maybe started Bear Hunting Magazine, is the reason why you kind of, what drives you. And so to hear that you've already figured that out in your mind, and that's like kind of something that underlays everything that you do, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you know, on a day-to-day basis, it's not like I wake up and you know, that's kind of the big picture stuff.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
But no, I just try to take it day by day. I don't really have any goals. I mean, like if you actually ask me about like career goals, like I
would never ask you that question. I don't like that question a lot of times because people ask me and I'm like, I don't know. I'm making a podcast. It's fun.
Yeah.
I've got one more for you, Clay, and then we'll let Kyle wrap it up because he likes having a good ending question. This one's bringing it home back to what we always talk about, but man, what is it about the Ozarks? Maybe it's a two-parter, but what is it about the Ozarks that in your mind makes it special? And then if you don't mind, if you have a story that goes with it, what's maybe your favorite Ozark experience or memory?
You know, I think I primarily love the Ozarks because it's where I'm from. I mean, you know, having a connection to place is powerful. And I really grew up in the Ouachitas, but I'm gonna lump them in as Arkansas Highlands.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a different range of mountains, but
we'll count
culturally identical.
Sure.
You know.
And you're here now.
Yeah, I lived here for 20 years plus, I guess. No, I've just been fascinated with the Ozarks, the folk culture of the Ozarks. You know, Arkansas was. I've heard it said that the Ozarks were culturally and geographically isolated for a long time, and that could be disputed. I've heard Brooks Blevins dispute that a little bit, kind of as the most true statement in the world. But in general, it really was. There wasn't any reason to be here, and there was a lot of you know, up and through the 1960s and 70s. I mean, the place was not much different than it was in 1870. I mean, you know, they had cars.
Yeah.
Some of them had electricity. But, I mean, just unique people. The natural beauty of the Ozarks is incredible. It's not the big mountains like you'd see out west. One of the guys from Newton County, he said that the Ozarks are intimate. He said if you're in the Rocky Mountains, you might see a big peak snow-covered peak, and you'll never set foot on that top of that
Yeah.
peak. But if you see a peak in the Ozarks, you can probably be there within a couple hours. So no, I've just always loved the highlands of Arkansas. I was raised here, and oh man, I've got all the Brooks Blevins books. Have y'all read all the Brooks Blevins books?
I've started them. My brother got me those for Christmas last year. I'm a very slow reader. But
man,
I have
you gotta
started
have Brooks Blevins is my hero, man. You gotta have him on the podcast.
We've talked
no
about
doubt.
it. He's on our list.
He is. There's not. He is the undisputed king of Ozark history.
Yeah.
And he is a nerd.
Yeah, we've got to have him on.
Oh, I love the guy. He was here just last week. He's a good friend of mine.
Man, we could have comboed a podcast meetup.
I really like him. He's written, I think, 15 books on the Ozarks.
Yeah.
And just really hyper specialized, you know.
Right. Yeah, I've started the first one when he's talking about all the way back from the beginning of how it's geologically different than like the Ouachitas.
Yeah.
And how it was formed and how it would actually be more appropriate to call the Ozarks, the Ozark Mountains, the Ozark Valleys, because it's formed over time. Erosion, and it's not these peaks. And you look across it, even and you see like a landscape photo looking across the Ozarks, a lot of the peaks are about the same
Yeah, it was
height.
It was a raised plateau.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Ozark. You should start this podcast off every week by talking about Ozark orogeny, mountain forming. Mountain
Orogeny.
forming. That's what it's called. Orogeny
Okay.
means mountain formation processes. This is well, that title doesn't even make sense. That book right there is like a deep book about mountain orogeny. Every geologic feature has like this wild history of how it happened, you know. But the Ozarks were wild, and the Ouachitas were even more wild.
Yeah.
Don't get me started; it's too late. Favorite topic:
All
the
right,
late implantation, the orogeny of the Ouachita and Ozarks.
That's a good word. I'm gonna have to add that.
I'm not going to try to say it publicly
to the
on the
yeah.
mic either.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to practice that in my head when it's written down for
Yeah.
a bit and then feel good speaking it.
All right, I've got one more question for you.
Do we get the story?
Man, that's like favorite Ozark story.
Oh.
I probably searching for Erskine's grave out in the Ozark Mountains. That was a really unique. I was reading this book right here, Wild Sports, written by a German named Gerstacker, a guy, Kim Smith. Kim Smith, he's a man. His name's Kim Smith. He's the one who did the bear research in Arkansas. He told me
This is coming back from
Coming all the way back.
today. Got it.
he told me when I was in college, I actually went and visited him, and I was like, "Hey, I'm reading these books that you wrote," and he said, "Hey, you ought to read this book, Wild Sports. It's about some crazy German came to Arkansas." That's all he said. And it was years before I read it. I finally read it, and that book is probably my all-time favorite book. And it talks about this guy who came to the Ozarks. He came within about probably 10 miles of where we're sitting.
Really?
Yeah. He came all the way up to the headwaters of the West Fork of the White River, where you could cross without getting your feet wet. You know, the White River. But there's a story in there about they ought to make a movie about it, and when they do, like, I should get credit for it. Okay, there's a couple of things I'm really
play it.
like not afraid to be bold on. It's that I killed a bear in Arkansas. What was the other thing? Nobody was talking about hounds and bait.
Or bear grease.
Bear grease, lots of stuff, and this one.
Boogie board bear.
Well, I'm not arrogant. I'm not worried about
I just
that.
like saying it if I'm being honest.
I'm okay if somebody else did that first. No, but there's a story of a guy getting killed by a bear down here in the Ozarks.
This is an early episode, right? Or
yeah,
earlier?
yeah. It's called Death of a Bear Hunter.
Because
I think it was
I remember
episode 4.
the Gershacker. Am I saying that correct?
Gerstacker.
Remember that name?
Oh, incredible! And the way that I found where it's believed that he was buried was a really unique story, because it involved meeting an old man named Ori Province, who was in his 90s and who had found what he believed to be the grave, and nobody knew where it was, only him. And he told me and another guy where it was, and we swore to never tell anybody, and I won't. I can't tell you where it's at. Sorry.
Did you go see it?
Yeah, we did, and it's not really certain that it's there. Like they thought it was there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a skeptic. You know, my
Mhm.
buddy Ranella says skepticism is the chastity of the intellect.
Whoa.
Skepticism is the chastity of the intellect. And so I'm always a little skeptical.
Mhm.
But, you know, it's like, just because this guy says it's here, you know, is it really here?
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
That was my favorite.
That's the stuff.
That's so good.
Go listen to The Death of the Bear Hunter, episode 4 of Bear Grease.
So it was early. Yeah, way early.
Yeah.
Yep. I think
Okay,
it was episode
that's
4.
great.
Heck yeah.
What's yours there, Kyle?
Well, it's totally a side note, but it was something that we talked about. I think would be a good question. We're two young men who have families, a daughter. Each of us have a daughter. How do you balance everything that you do with being a good husband, being a good father, you know, raising your children in the way that you want to bring them up? How do you balance all of your career and your outdoor pursuits and traveling all over the country and the world with being here at home and with your family?
Yeah. That is a hyper relevant question to anybody. You know, if I was an insurance agent, or if I worked at a grocery store, or if I did anything, you could ask me the same question.
Sure.
And I view my life in big swaths. I believe there's an architecture to life. Like this building has an architecture. It's got a foundation. It's got walls. It's got a roof. And if the architecture is right inside of your life, you can do a whole bunch of stuff and build a whole bunch of stuff that will last. If the architecture is wrong, you will squander your life building stuff that doesn't work very well, from family to business to career to just like personal satisfaction. And the number one thing for me inside of balancing my career is viewing it for what it really is, which is really a pretty small part of my life. It's what people would see. It's an external thing.
Sure.
That people would see. They would think that all I think about is hunting. All I think about is these stories. All I think about is this thing that they see. But really, the overarching thing that I give most credibility to is, you know, you guys, I know you guys are believers, would be my relationship with God,
Mm-hmm.
my commitment to my church, my commitment to my wife, my commitment to my children. I mean, these things, they supersede everything.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things I don't make media about. I don't rarely, honestly, rarely do I talk about it. I'm opening it up to you guys about it. And if that is genuine, it's easy to say that.
Sure.
It's very easy to say that. And it's okay to say something that you want to be true that maybe's not. I mean, you gotta want to grab for it. And it's very much been a process that I have not perfected yet.
Okay.
I mean, it's you know, being a man is we're in an interesting position because we do have to provide for our families. We have to be aggressive to go out and fight for, you know, our world. And so that takes, you know, I want to provide financially for my family. So I got to go fight and build a career and work hard and think about stuff and stay up late and wake up early and do all this stuff. But that's this like lower level stuff. The big picture is, and it's all about internal architecture. It's hard to describe. You might see my life and be like, Clay, you spent 8 hours today in this office doing this stuff and only 2 hours with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't, it's not always rational either.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's just like having your priorities straight. I mean, that would be a good way to say it. But
I really like internal architecture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna hold on to that.
Yep.
And thinking about, you're saying like basically when you say this stuff is lower level, like podcasting and hunting and all this stuff, that's lower level. Are you saying that like remember what you do all of that for, which is your family?
It just means that if it all went away, it'd be difficult. It would be like something I'd be sad about.
Sure.
But it is not, it will go away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like I would be pretty confident saying I'm not going to work for MeatEater till the day I die, unless I die prematurely, which is possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably not going to be 75 and still doing what I'm doing. I don't know what I'll be doing, but
Killing bears on a boogie board.
Yeah. This is just, people won't remember Clay Newcomb, the bear hunter.
Mhm.
The generations of my offspring will remember the character of Clay Newcomb. I mean, that's all.
Mhm.
That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and so that's what I focus on. I do. I focus a lot on internal character, and you've got to be the same when nobody's looking as you are when they're looking.
Mhm.
And that's hard to do. And I don't say that I always do that, but that's my declared intent in my life.
Yeah.